I'm here today to visit with Tom Moates about his book, A Horse's Thought, which is the first in his series of a journey to honest horsemanship, a journey into honest horsemanship. So welcome, Tom. I really look forward to diving into this book. It was so fun to reread it, and there's so much good stuff in there.
Well, thanks for having me back again, Emily. And I tell you, it's probably my favorite book that I've written. In a lot of ways, they're all exciting in their own way, but this book was like very, very pivotal, and it gathered up a pivotal information, and I was drinking it in for the first time. But it's also very experiential. You know, a lot of what happens in this book it's happening to me for the first time. I'm muddling through things. Had just met Harry Whitney, and so um, it really was blasting me into, what would become sort of the rest of my writing and horsemanship career up to this point. I mean, it was a completely seismic shift, and it's been my best-selling book over the years. And that's saying a lot for a book to have that kind of shelf life. It's everyone's, it's a favorite for a lot of people. People like the Colt Starting series too. That gets a whole lot of favorites thrown at me. But this book is just, yeah, it's super special. So I'm always excited to talk about this one.
Well, I mean, you start right off the book with the deconstructing chapter. And I mean, that's something that I feel like so many of us who've been working at horsemanship for decades can relate to, that feeling of like, okay, I think I've got it sort of sorted out. And then, oh my gosh, we're going all the way back down to below the foundation. So maybe you could visit a little bit about that, what that felt like.
Right. Well, and to sort of paint the picture of what was going on at the time, I had, as we talked in the one of the previous podcasts about that first book that I published, Discovering Natural Horsemanship. I we brought Niji home, and I kind of fell in love with this horse, and it just the whole horse thing. I just got really obsessed with it, and I was already an obsessive writer. So the two things kind of hit together, and I was writing for a bunch of magazines, Eclectic Horseman being one of the first ones. Thank you very much. And um, just trying to understand horses, get better with my horsemanship, answer these questions. And I was in a unique position in that I had access to so many notable professional clinicians and horse people and researchers, and because I was a journalist, and so I really started just sort of constantly writing about horsemanship in particular, and I was asking the questions that I needed to know myself. And I think that doesn't make it a job, that makes it a passion, right? I had to know these things, and I was watching videos back when they were on VHS tapes, if you can imagine.
Yeah, way back.
Imagine that way back, and oh, just reading anything I could get my hands on, but also on the phone, one on one, and in person sometimes, talking to clinicians and trying to get questions answered. And so I had been at that for 2 or 3 years, and was publishing in a lot of different major magazines and in other countries too, in England and in Australia, because it was actually quite broad, the publishing of my horsemanship writings. And um, then I had a chance to go visit Harry Whitney in Arizona. He invited me to come out to a couple of his clinics, and we had talked on the phone. I was doing what I call a roundtable discussion, which I still do at Eclectic, even these days. But I'll get an idea, a question that I want an answer to, and then I don't know, three, four, sometimes even five people. I get them to sort of talk to me one on one, and I would put all those different interviews into one article so people could read the different perspectives, and I kind of narrate my way through it because I'm also interested. And so I was doing one on picking up a soft feel, right? You're like, what does that mean? Especially when you're first starting out. And I mean, you could have been riding horses a long time even, and I hadn't. I'd only been riding horses seriously for a few years, but like if someone comes up and says, "Well, you got to pick up a soft feel," you're like,
What does
"What? What
that
is it?"
mean?
So, I think that was for Western Horsemen, and I had talked to quite a few, of the bigger names at the time, and someone said, "Hey, you got to call this guy Harry Whitney. I just saw him in Tennessee. You got to call him and talk to him." So I did, and the discussion we had was so different from discussions I had had with anyone else, and I think first of all, Harry didn't throw, sound bites at me, which as a journalist you get sometimes. People are in front of the camera and it's their profession, and they just, they don't go very deep necessarily. They kind of like say, okay, blah blah blah. Well, Harry was extremely careful to try to find words to answer my questions, and was really like that. The intensity of his interest of of helping me understand was really strong. And so we went back and forth over a number of calls. I mean, it wasn't just like one call and it was over. He was open to talking to me more. And of course, I was just grabbing it up. So I was latching on, but I was also understanding a little bit deeper because he was providing the time and the language to help me. And he's finally was like, with something like this, it's hard to work on this if we were standing in a round pen with a horse right here. He said, and here over the phone, and there's no horse, to demonstrate things. Why don't you just come out for a couple of weeks? So, I was like in no position to do that. Like I went and got a credit card out and said, do I do this or what? And like so I get plane tickets and I'm thinking, man, this is nuts. But went out there for a couple of weeks, and that's kind of like where a horse's thought starts. I mean, I got completely. I expected to go out there and like take the toolbox that I had already begun and like add to it. And what happened was like that toolbox got chucked out the truck going. And I went and had a whole new toolbox. Like I mean, a deconstruction is a great way to start the book. And that was an essay. Horse's Thought didn't start out as a book. Um, it started out as a series of essays that I just had to write. I mean, I was sitting down. I don't even know if I had published them at the time, and I realized, man, this is actually a book. This isn't just a bunch of because they just kept coming, and I was just obsessively working on it. And so I say right there in the beginning, it's like I thought I had a foundation to begin framing what would be my horsemanship journey. And actually, the foundation got ripped down and a new one got laid up. Like I got totally deconstructed, but that needed to happen because I had to have the seismic shift in my understanding to get the foundation towards really working better with horses. And the rest of this book is about many, many aspects of the beginning of that journey. But it really starts with one thing, which is the title of the book, A Horse's Thought. And if you, until one accesses a horse's mind, um, the one is just working with the horse's body. Okay. Mechanically is a term I use sometimes. And how do you get a willing partner if you're just pushing a body around, right? Like
Hmm.
you can't get to a state of willingness until I mean, willingness almost demands that the mind be involved, right? And so if you're, yanking on a rein to get a horse to go this way and that way, and the horse's brain is going the opposite way and the opposite way, even though they're acquiescing to what this pulling is happening, that's not a willing critter. And there's a whole lot of horsemanship or horse activity that looks like that until people can grab an understanding that helps them to um, access to look at a horse. I don't even know how to say this. Okay, so at first I couldn't even look at a horse and know if the horse's brain was there or not. I
Right,
mean,
right.
I didn't even have the perspective to. So a lot of this book is talking about my change of focus so I could see what was right in front of me, what it meant for the relationship between me and the horse, and then to uh, improve that, right? To learn how to work with that, to get the horse more relaxed, get that tension out of there, get the horse's attention here, and then be able to follow a feel instead of just have his body driven around or pulled around, right? So I think in my wordiness, that's about as good as I can do.
Well, I had a couple thoughts there, but so thinking about that light bulb moment, and you talk about that in the book where you with the quote from Harry about, between the reins is a horse's thought. If you can think back to that, was it the words for you? Was it the image? Like, what was the thing that made the spark light up in your brain? Can you take us back there?
Well, it was definitely watching Harry work horses, but if there hadn't been words involved, I don't know that I would have been able to grasp it just watching it.
Hmm.
And I mean, one example that comes to mind, because I saw a lot of round pen work being done with horses. Well, I've seen a lot of round pen work being done with horses, right? So you got a clinician in a round pen with a horse who's running around the round pen, right? Seen it 50 times, 100 times. So what's different about Harry? Well, the difference in that instance, this one instance that might be a good one to kind of explain this is Harry wasn't pushing the horse to run around the round pen, right? And he's got a flag, he's whacking his flag. Another guy might be in a round pen, he's got a flag, he's whacking the flag. But Harry was standing still in the middle of the round pen, whacking a flag, saying, "Hey, I'm over here." Like, "Hey, you don't need to be out there running around like a maniac. When you're ready to let that go, I'll be here." And he might pick one spot in the round pen and whack there, and here comes the horse again, whack there, and eventually that horse stops ahead of where he knows there's going to be a whack and turns and faces him, right? I was mesmerized. But Harry's, you can ask questions of Harry when he's in the middle of stuff. It was very informal, which was very helpful. And he's got his microphone on and he's talking when he remembers to, you know, try to say what he's doing because he always tries to, give you a clue what's going on when he's in there. And the other people I'd seen, boy, they take a flag and drive one around hard, drive them around, drive them around. Well, that's an ill feeling to a horse. And then you stop driving them and you suck back and they turn and they come to you. But so often, the ears are pinned, the tail's swishing, and it's an ill feeling with the person, but it's worse being out there chased, right? So, but I'd only ever seen him driven and chased and sucked in, and I thought that was amazing. Whoa, he's talking to this horse without a lead rope. The horse is at liberty. So that was the beginning of me understanding the difference between driving a horse and drawing a horse, driving a driving a horse into doing something, or offering a feel for the horse to go with you. So instead of, if I got a horse on a lead rope and I start taking the end of the lead rope and whacking it, threatening his behind, well, yeah, he'll shoot forward, but he's getting away from my rope, which is attached to me. He knows he's getting away from me. That has uh, relationship ramifications,
Right, right.
right? Where if I just offer a feel and ask that horse to go, the horse oftentimes will look and be willing to go, and people are amazed at that, because if you haven't seen it, all you've ever seen is driving a horse, and I think it's in people to want to drive them. We drive our kids around through the door, down the shopping, the grocery store aisle or whatever. We drive cattle, I mean, it's just kind of in us to do that. So the thought that we could offer the horse, it just doesn't occur to people, and it hadn't occurred to me until I saw the juxtaposition. I had an understanding of the juxtaposition. So the amazing thing about horsemanship, and I think what my journey has taught me, is that it's not about training the horse. It's not about changing the horse. It's about changing you and your perspective. And that different worldview changes the experience in the relationship between you and the horse. I mean, it's probably true of life in general, a person's worldview. Some people have a worldview and you're like, man, that's a miserable person. But that person is just so sure that everything is wrong and negative and glass half empty and out to get them. And that taints everything, right?
Yeah.
So if you approach every horse with the understanding of um, that horse has the capacity to follow a feel instead of immediately driving it to go do something because you got to whack them in the butt with the end of a rope to get them to go somewhere. I mean, that will really alter the way your horse experiences turn out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everything's not just super peachy all of a sudden, but sometimes horses come through really quickly. Other times it takes more work. But even the way that the work unfolds when it took more work, watching Harry was different from the people that I had seen up to that point.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
I can't remember where it is in the book. I wrote it down, but I didn't mark it about you write that you travel long distances to watch Harry do nothing. And
yes,
I'm like, I mean, I was just like, oh, I got to write that down. I mean,
that
and that,
that's the truth.
yeah.
And there are people that go to see Harry and they're like, why should I come watch this? He's good because he gives the horse so much time to come through if the horse is searching. And
Hmm.
when he gets busy, oftentimes it's because a horse is stuck and not trying to search something out. So you're helping the horse break his mind loose so that he can find a better place. To maybe that's the way to say it, right? So I mean, Harry will get plenty big sometimes, and you'll see some dust, but he's not doing it at the horse. He's doing it just to say, hey, 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 and then he's not looking for necessarily one specific answer, right? He's looking for the horse to let go of what he is stuck on, which is not the right answer, and try something else. And it may even be the wrong answer, but he's not going to get punished for the wrong answer. He's going to get encouraged to try, right? He gets that. You put pressure on a horse, people talk about pressure and release, whatever. You get a little big doing something. If a horse's mind is stuck on another horse out of the fence and down the hill or something, say, well, you got to get big enough to be big enough to be bigger than that horse and drawing that other horse's mind down the hill. But you don't get so big that um, sink the whole ship or cause more anxiety, right? There's already anxiety because the horse has found a distraction to focus on instead of being where his body is with you in the pen or whatever it is, right? I mean, I might be jumping ahead and maybe this is going too deep already, but so getting big, hey, whacking the flag, whacking your chaps, kicking dirt up, doing something to say, let that go and be here. Let that go, try something else, right? And then encouraging the something else. And then maybe he goes over there and gets distracted. Well, then you got to break that loose. But at first, hey, at least it's not that other one that was really big, right? So it's like direction, not perfection. And if you try to make perfection be from the very beginning, you can just cause more anxiety sometimes and confine a horse into doing something. And it's not the same as a relationship of offering a field to go with. Again, I might be
No, and that's, I mean,
muddling things, but
yeah, no, and that's, I mean, that, yeah, I resemble that, like I've, I know exactly what that feels like. So it's definitely relatable. And I don't know why it's like, it's such a challenge to be able to let go of I mean, and maybe it's because as a writer, you're always thinking of the narrative of how you want things to go, and with the horse that there is no narrative. It's those changes moment to moment. So feedback from folks over the years, have you had some notable responses to the work?
oh, I've had tremendous feedback on, especially on this book. Well, the book's been around a long time too, so there's been a lot of time for feedback. But I think it really resonates. with people, and one of the reasons definitely is that people see themselves in the book because I was so honest about my difficulties. And I think it's unlike, well, at the time I wrote it, I don't know of any other book that was like it out there. I don't know of anyone that wrote a kind of an honest horsemanship memoir about their wrecks and, trying to figure it out and get it straight and have an input from, it was pretty unique in that way. Um, but I get letters and people say, thank you for writing this because I thought I was the only one that had this kind of trouble, or they feel very insecure. And I mean, we all do, right? I mean, you go to your first clinic and get on your horse and get in front of people. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge deal. I mean, it's very difficult. And and I tried to lay it all out there because I wanted to share what I had learned, what I was learning. I mean, it's not even really past tense. It's kind of, you pick this book up and you start reading it, and you're right in there with me. I mean,
Yeah.
you come along for the wrecks and the amazing successes, and things are going great, and then bam, something happens and all that gets dashed, and I'm completely deflated, ready to just get rid of the horse and get a goldfish. I mean, it's like
Yeah. Yep. We've all been there.
the next day something works and you're like, whoa, no, I love horses, I'm gonna buy three more. So yeah,
Yeah.
but I think the book is so honest in that way that people, I mean, it's kind of how I came out with the term for the honest horsemanship series, because like it's ended up being 5 books. I mean, I don't know if there'll be more, but so far it's been 5. It's been 5 for a few years. And I was trying to think of, like the series kind of needs a name. And then I just thought, well, I mean, it's honest horsemanship in that I'm trying to be honest with my readers, but there's a certain honesty with the horse when you take away pretense and you take away mechanical applications of gizmos. And, to me, it was just like, it was a word that kind of described it. So anyway, and I think that's why it resonates so much with people. And the other thing is that just I was in the moment, or just past the moment where these things happened when I recorded them. And I was at that pivotal point in my understanding and my own journey and my own capabilities and my own knowledge. Um, so these things are recorded right when they're happening, right after they've happened. And so they're so vibrant. And when I go back and I read it, I mean, this is a book for me. I mean, again, it's like I write the book I wish I could have read when I was
Yeah.
into this. I mean, honestly, and that's cool. And at the time I was doing it, I would say that because I even knew it at that point. I had an awareness. This was like I had an awareness when I went to Harry's the first time. I was getting deconstructed, like, oh, this is a complete and utter worldview change, right? And then we get on with this. But um the anyway, I lost my train of thought on that one.
Well, and I'm not sure how to ask this question, so let me fumble through it. But when we are trying to understand something, especially as writers, and communicate the things that we are learning, we're communicating them with the knowledge that we have and the understanding that we have, so that when a shift like this happens, I mean, it is like reality changes and we can see differently what's happening where before we didn't see it. I mean, and it doesn't negate what's gone before, but it's hard sometimes for people to be okay with saying, I didn't have it right and now I have it more right, or a better picture of reality. And I mean, you're sharing a shift in reality for you.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is that I can pick up this book and just crack it open pretty much anywhere and immediately get sucked in, you know, and because I think the whole book it's just it's that moment, is the moment by moment by moment all through the book. It's just so poignant and so alive that, boom, you crack it open. And then as my abilities got better, I stopped having so many wrecks. So, you know, you get to the other one, between the reins is very much like horse's thought. I mean, that was going on at the same time. And then you get further along the trail, already by the title, I'm expressing the fact that, well, this is different. This is further along the trail. I'm not in the same pickles that I was in back then, and I shouldn't be. I mean,
Right.
I've gained some handiness. I've gained some new understanding, and then it's going somewhere is the fourth one, and passing it on is the fifth one. By the time I get to passing it on, I'm talking about teaching other people, because at that time I was teaching other people, which I never ever in a million years thought I would ever do. When I'm writing a horse's thought, I'm just sure I'm going to be this bumbling novice, the world's best known bumbling novice forever. But that's not the way it works. You you gain experience, you gain understanding. This works, that doesn't. And I just don't think, if I hadn't been exposed to Harry, I don't think I would have really gotten this. I don't know where I would have gotten this from. And it's one of the reasons I have been so intent to write so much about it, because I want people to get it, to see it, to glean, incorporate this into what they've already got going, and seeing how it can make one realize where one is missing things. The person. I mean, the horse is just being a horse, right? Um, so it's really us that needs to change how we interact with the horse to help the horse to a better spot and develop a better relationship. And sometimes it seems like the horse has kind of been sitting there going, I mean, what you been waiting for? Like, wow, you got it. Good human, right? So, but this book, and I think it's been such a good seller, and there's been so many nice things written about it, because of that reason, because it was just boom. It's just a really amazing point in my life that I was able to record and share with people in a way that can be enjoyed. And I go back to it and I love it. It's probably my favorite book, although the Colt starting books also are awesome. And between them, well, there's good stuff in all of them. I shouldn't really say that, but there is a little, there's just a little something special about this one, I think, because, and the other thing was, okay, so I decided to do a Kindle version, right?
Mhm.
And so when I did the Kindle version, I went back, I had to redo the layout of the whole thing. And I think I did a intro to the Kindle version or whatever. You go through the whole manuscript when you're doing that kind of work. And I was reading this going, holy cow, like I had no idea I that was in the first book. Like I had no idea that was in this book. Like I thought that was in like the third book. But the thing is that I saw so much that first trip out to Harry's. Like even didn't realize and remember how much I grabbed of the foundation of what he's got going on, and was able to articulate it, like from the very beginning of getting involved with it. Like it's just like, man, this flash went off when I was out there, and I grabbed some ideas and was able to kind of run with them, not just in the horse work, which still was a bunch of wrecks, but in the and okay, so another way to talk about this is that, I talk to people about auditing clinics or riding in clinics, and there's so many people that won't go to a clinic unless they can take a horse and ride. They're like,
Mhm.
well, but I say to them, I learned more from auditing clinics than I ever learned from riding in clinics. And I learned things riding in clinics that I could not have grasped auditing. That's true. But the sheer magnitude of information that I gained, gained way more from auditing than I ever did from riding. When you're riding, you're worried about your horse, you're focused on your horse, you're not always paying attention to what other people are doing. You hear a gate clang over there and your mind leaves what's going on. It's just like when you're there to audit, it's just like, bring it on.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah.
and I think what you see in my books, and I think what's true for probably everyone, is that we get an idea of how something might work better. Okay. And then we go and try to apply it, but we don't have experience applying it. So it that part is really rough, or maybe it's terrible at first, but we've seen it work well. So we know what the idea is, but now we've got a place to start. So you're always getting the idea first and then going out to your horse and trying it. But how do you get the idea first? I mean, you can observe and get ideas and try and have them work. But the beauty of having handy people to learn from is that you can go and learn from someone who's already made mistakes and muddled through it. And so then you look and you think about that, you get that idea, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I think. Well, just think about rope management.
Yeah.
I mean, I just about got myself killed 100 times. And now today that I don't even think about the rope. It's just second nature. But at first I had to think about it and know how to handle this rope safely or get that right. I mean, it's just everywhere along the line, I was picking up ideas and then trying to incorporate that into my own horse work. Right. So those ideas are really important. And I really think this book brings those ideas forward and brings them forward in a way where then you can laugh with me as I break my neck.
Yeah.
Or, you know, oh, and the usual suspects, Niji, and I had my first mare's name was Sokeri, which is the Finnish word for sugar.
Hmm.
And I think maybe Jubal and Festus got on the scene for too long. Chief, I don't know. So in all these suspects, as all five books go along, they all their stories are intertwined with my shenanigans, and it goes worse. So anyway, and I think that's a lot of fun for readers too. They they get to follow the stories, they get to
Yeah.
follow the horses, and I love to write about them so much that I think there's a lot of description and clarity of what they look like, what they acted like, how I acted. I think I hope it comes through, and from the feedback I get from people, I feel it has. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Super relatable. And I do think people learn from those stories. And I go, oh, that's a little bit like my horse when that horse does that, and they're able to personalize that experience. But so is there a passage or two from the book that you'd like to share with us today, Tom?
Like I said, I can crack this book open anywhere.
Awesome. Do it.
Before I read something, okay,
Okay.
I'll just crack it open and read something because I think it is all good. Um, this book has a chapter that people either love or seem to hate. And I guess I should talk about that a minute. It's called The Myth of Natural Horsemanship.
Yes. Yeah, for
and, I,
sure.
and I know we've published it at Eclectic before, and I think it gets a lot of hubbub. And I've taken some heat for it and gotten a lot of happy slaps on the back for it over the years. Um, and really, all the chapter is saying is that this term that gets bandied about, natural horsemanship, what I say is that it's such a broad term that it lacks meaning
Hmm.
when you get right down to it. And, I say, Pat Pirelli coined the phrase to mean this in his book by that name. And then people kind of grabbed hold of it. And some people wanted to be associated with it. Some people desperately didn't want to be associated with it. And, but what I say is that when you get right down to it, there's so many different approaches to horsemanship that almost everyone's individual. Every horse is different. So I was just talking about that in an essay form because I kept coming up against that. And I just wanted to kind of clear the air for myself and say, whatever, let's just call it good horsemanship, whatever, because trying to classify me as a natural horseman, to me, it just doesn't mean anything. I mean,
Hmm.
and so today I think so much um, better such better horsemanship has entered the mainstream that it's even, the us and them is even flushed out further. I mean, I think it's been tremendous the amount of change that, Tom Dorrance, Ray Hunt, that type of horsemanship has infiltrated into the show world, the Western world, the ranch. I mean, it's like you can't hardly go anywhere that there's now nomenclature to discuss things that really needed to be discussed
Hmm.
for people to have better relationships with their horses. And so anyway, it was never meant to be a negative attack or anything like that. And some people just have a knee-jerk reaction and have that. But if you read what it's saying, it's really just saying, be careful of the Uber term because what does it mean? Like
Right.
you look under the directory of natural horsemen, there's 10 people, like you're not going to get the same 10 things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, but let's see. I'll pop open here. All right, chapter 10. I'll read a little bit of chapter 10, Riding the Line.
Okay.
I've kind of forgotten what this is about. So this is exciting.
We'll see. We'll discover along.
The level of constant support a horse needs from the rider, especially a green horse, completely eluded me. It amounted to no little passing insight when I began to figure this out. Rather, it quickly proved to be a profound earthquake of realization. The pillars shook on which my skills with horses were unknowingly quite precariously placed. No wonder they had occasion to tumble down and for me to tumble off the horse. Oddly, years of sustained attention to detail during groundwork and when riding still left this insight laying beyond the scope of anything I ever recognized or guessed. I thought I paid very close attention to the horses I worked with. In a way, surely I did. I watched hard and looked for meaning in the way the horses handled themselves. I saw ears and eyes giving signals. I thought a horse was with me when we rode along easy in the direction I chose. I thought getting a horse to willfully circle at my command meant focus was on me. Yet there were mammoth holes in my abilities to truly get and hold a horse's attention. There existed a chasm in the support I offered a horse big enough to drive a combine through. Until fairly recently, I possessed no clue of snowballing trouble in horses I rode until the progression became all too evident. At that point, when the horse is plainly pushing through my requests and on his own line of action, the results were all too late to fix. The roots of problems remained unobserved, but I sure noticed the wrecks and fights and bad misbehavior, and I worked to sort that stuff out. To put it another way, if the progression of trouble was scaled 1 to 10, I'd see a 9 or 10, and I'd never come close to seeing a 5 or 6. But I needed to be able to see that 1 to best support the horse and get him feeling completely right about things, not to mention making my life a whole lot more pleasant and safe. Substantial gains in progress certainly were made on many fronts in my work with horses. If not, I surely would have quit or spontaneously combusted. Not to mention that all of the previous chapters in this book wouldn't be here either. The joys of breaking through to a new understanding all along the horsemanship journey are incredibly exciting and strong motivation to continue the work. I sorted out some troubles, learned much, advanced my understanding of how horses tick, and saw some great positive change at times. I even rode some horses in paddocks, round pens, and out on the farm with increasingly good progress. Just as I'd think everything looked fantastic, they'd explode in my face, or I'd find my face in the dirt after a wreck, wondering how I managed to get thrown through the windshield again. How perplexing that became. I became better at crisis management than noticing and diffusing the smaller escalating aspects of trouble brewing in horses that ultimately resulted in big trouble. So you can see
Yeah. Yeah. It's just what we've been visiting about.
just what we've been visiting about, and it's and I don't know that there's a good stopping point without reading the whole chapter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it goes on and on. But that probably gives a taste of the narrative voice, but also the focus, right? It's like boom, 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 boom. And this is called riding the line. So I'm sure what happens is I get to thinking about Harry talks about when you're riding, think about a line going out there in front of your horse and you're trying to stay on that line. It gives you a focus to guide your horse, right? And so if you think of a line and you're riding that line, you got your horse on that line, but your horse all of a sudden is off that line, out of the navigational beacons, um, you got trouble. And then trying to see when that occurs, um, and there's probably this chapter, but I'll just tell the story. There's this point where I'm on Niji and we go up the driveway, right? And I may even have mentioned this in the other podcast, but it's a great example. I think it's this chapter. So I worked for like weeks restarting my deal with Niji, riding in the round pen, riding in the yard, riding 50 feet and coming back, right? So, okay, this is great. We're going to ride to the other side of the farm down the farm road. So we get down, it's going great. We're lining out through the valley up the other side, and I'm going to take a left-hand turn to go this way. And he decides, no, we're going to the right, you know? And
Yeah.
I'm like, what just happened? Like we've been a quarter mile and everything's been great. You've been right here on the line, and now big wreck. I mean, he's off the through the ditch and trying to wipe me off with a tree branch, and I'm getting fuming angry because it's like, oh, I've worked weeks on this. It was going so good. What happened? Like I couldn't understand what happened. So I got off and walked him home and exploded. Just like it was just so frustrating. So anyway, I had a friend come over and watch me, and they recognized the fact that 2 or 3 steps, and the horse was on his own, and I was on my, we weren't in the same space, and I hadn't realized that.
Hmm.
We were in parallel universes going to the same destination, but the horse had an interest to go in there, and I had an interest in going there, but really we weren't together. If I picked up a rein and asked him to, okay, let that go, and let's go to the left, it wasn't available, but I didn't realize that. Like this was a great lesson to say, is your horse with you or not? How do you find these things when they're small enough to deal with before they get big enough, and see, and what I'm saying there at the beginning of the chapter is I would see the big stuff. I'd see the nines and tens, but I wouldn't even catch in the fives, let alone the ones. But if I could catch the one, then I could really be ahead, support my horse when things are manageable, before the horse's mind ever gets super stuck on something else, right? And when they're sticking on the same thing you're kind of wanting to do, how do you know? You have to ask different questions.
Yeah.
Huge lesson for me. Huge lesson for me. But there again, writing about that frustration of Niji carrying me through the ditch, and I know I described well my little fit I had, getting off him and stamping my feet and wanting to kill him, not doing it, but just like, you know, just go get a
Well,
golf.
and I mean, it's so helpful to, I mean, we read stories about the feeling of what it feels like when it's good and wonderful and connected and yes, and that we're all hunting that. But I do feel like we learn so much more from the sharing of the when it doesn't work out, when we are facing those troubles, because we all go through it.
And the book's just it's full of those kind of anecdotal moments. And later in the series, it's I mean, I guess just the nature of the evolution of your own understanding, it gets more kind of philosophical.
Hmm.
So, I a lot of times I'll bring in things that I've seen at a clinic or, um, clients that I've worked with as I'm teaching horsemanship. The clinics that I'm teaching now, I'll see things, but I'm not having these troubles the same way. I mean, the problems arise, right? But I'm working on them when they're ones or twos or threes, occasionally a seven. But
Yeah.
it's like for the most part, low numbers. And,
Yeah.
and so there's not these brilliant pictures to share that everybody can see and laugh with me, and there's dust flying and things like that. So, but that's the natural progression, and as everyone gets better, I think the philosophy and where does that philosophy lead to next, or as it unfolds and you get deeper and deeper into new things. I mean, I'm fooling around with haunches in and out, leg yields, whatever. I couldn't even have considered, I couldn't even have considered that when I started. I was trying to stay on the horse, and there was a long time in between there. And so I think, I think it's really neat to have recorded so much of the journey by being so obsessed with sharing the story and writing about it. I mean, I think it's pretty unique in that way, the whole series. But yeah, if anyone ever asks, oh, you write books about horses, what book should I get? I'm like, get a horse's thought. Like
Yeah.
start with that. See what you think of that one because I think it's so relatable.
Yeah. Well, and I love how you've organized the book where you start each chapter with a quote from Harry, and then it's organized, or there's anecdotes and experiences, but it's around a theme. And so it feels like, okay, horsemanship is so big, like there's so much, but if I just think about this one piece, I can gain a little bit of a toehold to move forward.
Well, and that brings up a good point, which is every chapter is a lesson essentially. Um, and it began as essays. Probably I was thinking magazine work or just writing them because I had to get it. I was a writer. I had to get it out onto the page. It's kind of like it's a disorder. It's just the way it is. And that's kind of the way. I mean, I think it is helpful because if you read a chapter, it is a lesson. I mean, there's something that happens. Then I usually try to get Harry to give me some advice, and then I try to apply it, and it works sort of. Maybe it doesn't work, or maybe I get it wrong, and it ends up really not working. And then I go back again. So but it's and when I started doing this, Harry's never written books. I don't think Harry ever will write books. He's not. That's just not something that he's been interested in doing for his own reasons. But um, he's so involved in my books. It's been uh, interesting to have his blessing, in this work. And I usually just everything I write, I pass. I don't want to get anything wrong or misplaced. But and he said to me before, he's like, well, the thing about your books is that it's your experience, right? So you're not trying to say you need to go do this. It's not a horsemanship program, right? It's not a it's not a how to by any stretch of the imagination. It's a memoir,
Hmm.
right? And it just happens to be hinging on a lot of Harry's teaching. And so I have this specific problem, and I asked Harry, he said this at this moment with this problem, and I tried this. Well, that's different than saying you should go out with every horse and do this, and in 5 minutes your horse is going to be fixed or whatever, because that's just not something that's true, and we don't pretend like that's true. So, but I think the reason I've had such blessings from Harry in all of these books all along the way is because of that, because it's the legitimacy is it's my experience, and and I probably brought in things from other places too. um you know just working with the horses and figuring some things out, right? I mean, there's some of that in there too. But as far as Harry being involved as he is, it's been wonderful to just have his blessing, and I know that that's why it came about. It's just, I mean, it's really not right or wrong. It's the guy's story. This is what
Hmm.
happened. So, and I'm not trying to say you need to go out and do this with your horse, but you might read about it and try something with your horse and find that it's helpful. So I'm not saying that don't do that, but I'm just saying that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is to get you to think about horses differently and enjoy the way I muddled through it, and maybe that'll save you some muddling in your own world. I guess that's the way to put
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling that we could visit about this book all day, but are
I
there
could, I could, I love it.
are there any questions that I didn't ask you that you want to address before we move on with our day?
Well, I enjoy the opportunity to visit with you about this book. And like I said, kind of in the beginning, this book was the the point at which everything changed. I mean, this book is a threshold that I walked through into a whole different world, and it changed my life, and it really has defined my livelihood, both in terms of my publishing, writing and publishing, and certainly the teaching of horsemanship that I do. And I really love sharing these things with other people. And it's difficult to get. I mean, horsemanship's not easy. It's the creatures are it's a different species. It's alien creatures who don't speak in complete sentences. And they I hope that people really enjoy this book and get a kick out of it. But I hope that enjoyment also stems from the fact that they relate, but they see a positive opportunity to think about things maybe in a different way. Think about a horse's thought. Think about a horse's thought being between the reins, right? Not just a horse's body. Because I think when you get right down to it, what I learned from Harry is that you've got to get a horse's mind with you to get a willingness, to get a change, to get them to be relaxed. And what we see over and over and over again are horses that are head high, tight as a fiddle string, biting that bit, can't stand still, prancing, right? And those are all symptoms of that horse wishing that they weren't there, wanting to be somewhere else and wishing they could get their body there. Whereas if we could get their mind right there with their body and it be okay, they can stand there, drop the rope on the ground, let the farrier pick up a foot. I mean, and that's the crux of the matter. I mean, that's why the title of the book is A Horse's Thought, because that's what that was what changed the trajectory of my understanding and my life with I mean, 20 years of it now. And I'm so grateful it happened when it did, you know. So, if I had to say anything just in summary, it's that I think Horse's Thought is just page after page of great insights, a fun read, and the underlying deal is that horses have thoughts, and that they get sideways, and that's what gets them nervous. And when we can engage with a horse, get that focus there, get those thoughts with us, that's when a true with you-ness and a true willingness can start to come into play. And I think that that's the basis for the best kind of horsemanship, the best kind of relationship. And it's we who change. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the horses show it, but they're mirroring what their experiences are with humans, right? And I think that's what's so powerful. I mean, you go to clinics and people have a really hard time at clinics sometimes. Tears are shed and frustrations are come out, and that's because they want so badly for their horses to be better and to be able to do things with them. I mean, that's what it's about, right? I mean, and so if this book has gone out there and helped people get closer to that improvement, that reality, I'm delighted. I've done my job there, and I think this book, um, I think it can do that. I think it does a lot of that, at least to the best of my ability.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fantastic. And I read it when it first came out, and then I reread it ahead of this visit, and I just every single chapter sticky note, underline something, and it's like page after page. It's like, oh yeah, that I can relate to that. I can feel that. And yeah, you did an excellent job capturing that. And thank you so much.
I signed a lot of copies of this book, and when I opened them up, they were tattered, and like the whole thing was one big, yellow highlighter. I had one gal, I saw her in Arizona multiple years. Every year she'd buy another copy of the book. And I say, you must really like the book. You know? She said, well, I keep lending it to people and never getting it back. So she was buying two books this one time. So I signed her book, and then I said, well, give me that other book. And I signed it, and I said, this book belongs to so and so and so. Please return it to her. Thank you, the author, Tom Moates. You
That's
know,
hilarious.
yeah, they get passed around quite a bit. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Tom, and I look forward to visiting about the rest of the books in the series. And we'll
that's a
just,
lot of visiting because there's a lot of books.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I know we can do it. So,
okay.
all right.
Well,
Hey,
thank you very much.
thank you.